Lacey was like right outside my door, like completely flopped over and crying.
Freaking out the whole time.
Yes. I was like, oh, the drama. But now she's here and she's happy. Eventually, we'll have to like maybe set up a Lacey cam.
That would be great. People would love that.
uh,
I would love.
I mean, she's good. She just sits there, doesn't do anything. She doesn't bark. She just lays there
Yeah.
and sleeps.
Just got to see a pup every now and then, though. That
Right.
makes life much better.
uh, I was a little worried that for a moment for Reeve, I was like, ooh, we're getting low.
I wanted that to be a little challenging, but
No, it was
also
good.
Reeve is very powerful. So yeah, there had to
Yeah.
be, I think, some opportunity to. So I wanted you to have the opportunity to like
Mm.
flex a little bit, you know,
Yeah,
find
no.
these newfound powers and play around some.
No, and I definitely love that. Warlocks are they're a lot of fun to play, but they're also very much about resource management.
Yeah,
And understanding like, okay, sometimes you can't always rely on spells because you only have 2 spell slots as a warlock. So
right.
you have to be thoughtful in what you're doing and rely more on maybe like class features or species features even. Like, is there something that you have as a certain species that you can leverage to your advantage? So I think that's one of the things too that I know that me as a player, my specific style is I am very strategic when it comes to combat and resource management. And that's something that I've always tried to do. And I try to be very thoughtful about what my action economy is, regardless
Yeah,
of the class I'm playing.
I try to think of that too. I just find it to be particularly challenging. I can't wrap my head around warlocks for some reason. Though I like
um,
the way that you're playing Reeve so far seems relatable because it's like a blade singer wizard where the
mhm.
focus is on close combat, melee combat, just kind of empowered with magic,
Yeah.
which is it sounds really fun to be honest. The trident is so cool.
Yeah, I have to think about it. We might have to homebrew it a little bit more because I was like, oh, shoot, I do get a little bit of a disadvantage on the trident and get a -1 on my rolls for the hit as well as on my,
Because of the weapon itself.
yeah.
But your packed weapon you are supposed to have proficiency with, aren't you?
And that's what I think I need to look because I don't think literally that was something I don't think we had talked about when we were doing creation. Like, what is
Yeah,
Reeve's
no, probably not.
pack weapon? Yeah. So I was like, well, what would make sense? And that was kind of like one of the things I was like, okay, Reeve has a pact with a great old one. Like it's going to make sense that it's going to be the trident specifically with all the water illusions that we've been having in
Yeah.
here. The drowning of Ulrich, the way that when Quinn was pulled into wherever Quinn is,
Yeah.
that Quinn was consumed by water. So I thought that would be a really fun way to flavor it, but I'll have to look at it and probably play with it a little bit. So it was literally like a, oh shoot, what is our pact weapon? So
I was like on the edge of my seat. I could waiting for you to make that choice. I was like, what is she gonna choose? This is gonna be really cool. And I'm really glad that you picked that. Because yeah, you're right. We so far we're not coming really outright and saying um who the patron is.
mhm.
I think that's a conscious choice that we're making and kind of omitting that at the moment. But the allusions to it are a lot of fun so far. And if there's enough clues there for people to pick up on too, I think that's even cooler. Um, but also from a character perspective, to have a character who doesn't know who their patron is necessarily for
Right.
them to get clues, which out of the context of, human existence doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but in the context of their realm will begin to make more sense over time.
Mhm.
Um, I find that aspect to be like just really fascinating. Like a trident to Reeve is just another item right now.
Right.
The meaning of that trident will become so much more apparent in however many, sessions down the line. But
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's like one of the really fun things about it too, because it was also a little bit, ha not necessarily, like, subconscious, but, like, maybe a little bit of, like, how much do I know about the lore that I can actually make this decision? Like, what would the patron say? "Oh, yeah, this is your packed weapon."
Mhm.
So and that's kind of the thing too, is, like, how much do we invest as a player versus the character? Like, how much does the player inform those character choices?
Yeah.
So trying to figure out, like, what is that exactly? And is this the character choice? Is this the patron choice? Or is it my choice as a player? And kind of balancing all those, which is kind of really fun as a warlock too, because you're like, okay, well, what would my patron want for this?
It's a whole extra level,
Yeah,
yeah, of decision tree responsibility.
yeah. Um, which is wild. And I super looking forward to next session as well because you get to be in the player seat this time, and I am really looking forward to the decisions that you get to take over. Um,
I think I'm more nervous about that, to be honest.
well, and it's
Just
so
feels like a
interesting.
lot to live up to.
Well, and I think that's one of the things that's really interesting is we have a similar vein that we follow when it comes to storytelling, but we also have our own unique ways that we handle it.
Mhm,
Um, my interpretation of how I like to play characters is going to vary with yours, but I think we also have that passion for storytelling and the storytelling and what makes sense in the lore, um, without taking away autonomy from the character themselves.
mhm. Yeah, that's something I am that last part, I'm especially, like, feeling myself being very aware of so far in
Mhm,
these first 2 sessions is there's a lot of setup that I think has had to be done so far to, like, get the story moving, but I really don't want to railroad us
mhm,
in any direction. Like, we both kinda know where the story is going, so there's gonna be an element of, yes, we know what we're doing, but I want to leave open as many spaces as possible for player choice, whether it is me as the player or you as the player. Um, and so these first 2 sessions, I've just been constantly thinking, like, even if they are, like, ultimately meaningless decisions, because we know as DMs, there's a lot of
mhm.
decisions that are not really decisions, but
Right.
I'm still asking myself, how many opportunities for choice can I include? Where can I add more in? Where can I just add more player engagement in? Where can I get your input for details that don't need to come from me, like the flavoring
Mhm.
of sensory input or the flavoring of magical spells and stuff? Like that doesn't all have to be up to the DM.
Right. And I think that's something that's like really cool and as far as like how we're going because specifically with a duet game, because it's just the two of us, it allows for more that creativity to really come out. It really allows us to have the opportunity to actually dive in, make those thoughtful choices. Um, I mean, because when you're running a game and you've got, I would say, even more than two people at the
Yeah,
table, when you have two players, it's like, all right, we got to go, guys. Let's move.
yeah. You have to take control sometimes and be like, okay,
Yeah.
this is yeah. They're disagreeing. You picked this. This is what we're doing.
So yeah, again, it's like this is definitely allows for more stylistic choices for the players and more autonomy for a player to actually make choices, which is something that is really unique.
Yeah.
And I think it'll be really fun for both of us too, because while I play in another game with you as a player, which is fantastic, we both spend a lot of our time DMing. So it's like, okay,
Hmm.
now we understand, like, hey, these are the kind of choices that we want our players to make. So we're now getting the opportunity to be like, okay, cool. Now I, as the player, get to make choices.
Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty fun. It's weird. I don't know. I'm thinking about metagaming all of a sudden. It's weird because we are
Yeah.
like we're ultimately both metagaming this, right, the whole time. We like I said, we
Right.
know kind of the story we want to tell. We've agreed to like the guardrails and the direction that we're going in and all this stuff.
Mhm.
So when we make these choices as DM or as player, it is with this bit of foreknowledge of the direction that we're heading in, but we're still willfully making choices, and it's with this agreement of we are doing this for um entertainment's sake, for storytelling's sake, for the purpose of like sharing this journey
Right.
that we wanted to go on, explore these topics that we've talked about wanting to explore, and we've only really just started getting into those. So this is like the very tip of the iceberg. But I
Yeah.
know we've talked about some like pretty potentially heavy kind of inner turmoil and conflict stuff coming up. So
Mhm.
I feel like we kept it a little bit on the light side today, which is good, I think, for a first intro. But I feel like you probably have some heavier stuff planned for me for our next session. So
Yeah, I think, next session, I really wanna take the opportunity to actually explore more of player autonomy and choice. Because one of the things that I've been doing as a player, um, and especially when you mentioned metagame, I thought of this specifically. I was like, yeah, this is exactly what I've been trying to like kind of like equalize in my head, I guess, is I have been only familiarizing myself with specific character traits, not with the actual story of the character. So that way, as those choices come up, I can make them in the moment. Um,
cool.
and it's really just based on like what we had said, like these are the core pieces of these characters.
Mhm.
They're studious, they're thoughtful, they're strategic, and you have one that is impulsive, lively, incredibly charismatic. Now, whether that's like scary charismatic or like hmm, charismatic
Right.
is yet to be seen. We just know that they're very influential and they don't have a problem like kind of toting that around and taking what they want. So just relying on those core pieces and going in my head, what would Quinn do? What would Reeve do?
Well, I like that almost improvisational approach to
Hmm.
just understanding your character's background and maybe their motivation and just taking that and kind of running with it. That's I feel like how I try to approach. So obviously, I mostly spend most of my time playing NPCs, and that's how I try to approach NPCs all the time too.
Yeah,
Because you don't have anything else most of the time. You don't. They show up for a scene and then they're gone. So all you have is what was this person's life the second before the characters met them, and what do they want in the next 5 seconds. Usually, it's for
right.
the players to fuck off, but
It's for the players not to burn the tavern down.
right. But those 2 pieces can offer enough variability to come up with so many different directions for a character or numerous characters. So,
Yeah.
yeah, that's some, like, great groundwork to build both Quinn and Reeve off of, and
Mhm.
I feel like it allows us both to kind of interpret a little differently while still working within, like, yeah, those guardrails, those like frames of these are the things that we kind of need to portray to stay faithful to the characters that we're wanting to bring to the game. But as long as we're, hitting those marks, the rest of the decisions, they are what they are.
Right. And I think that's like part of the challenge too. I know for prep because I'm trying to figure out like, okay, what's the best way to prep to make sure that I'm not giving you too many of the story beats that I want to hit during the next session. So I've really been
Mm.
thinking about like, okay, what are the goals? Um, and then just me as myself, keeping my hands out of our prep and where we put it. So that way I'm like, okay, like let's keep it out. Don't touch those. So that's been kind of like a fun thing too, because like we have our resources that we keep together, but I very much
Mhm.
have been like, don't touch any of this. Like this is for Nick's eyes only until we have session.
Right. That's
But
probably smart. I will avoid anything you put in there as well. But I'm also like anytime I create something new for this, I'm keeping that separate from that
yeah,
document until after the fact.
that's really smart. I would say I'm old school and I have my little notebook.
That's smart. Good. Yeah, I save everything digitally, but, like, when I've been homebrewing stuff, I'm
Mhm.
storing it, like, on my own account, obviously, and not putting
Yeah.
any of that information in our shared space. I didn't want you to know about the wool golem before today, so that's all
Yeah.
been separate. Um, what did I call it? I think I named it, like, sheared obsidian or something like that.
Oh,
Just
it's amazing. I love that. Um, what I really like too is the moment that you revealed that it was made of wool. Like, I also had to make the decision. I was like, okay, so me as a player, like, Janna knows that wool is highly flammable. Would Reeve know this? And trying to
that
figure
was
out,
a great decision too, because that worked surprisingly well. Yeah, the double damage from the fire. I was like, "Oh, hell yeah, that works." I'm so glad. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it was like one of those things of like, okay, so Janna as a person knows this. Is it too much to say that this is something that Reeve would know or not know? But I also feel like it was a moment of this creature is in proximity and is super close. What are Reeve's choices in getting it to fuck off?
Yeah. Well, and I feel like that's Reeves' kind of, like, imperious and courageous nature of,
Mhm.
like, "Fuck it, this'll work."
Yeah. Like Reeve doesn't care. They're like bold as shit.
Yeah.
Which is actually really fun to play as a character too. I think there's something to say about when you play characters that maybe aren't as much of you. Like I would say as far as relatability, I definitely relate more to Quinn. Like
Mhm.
very studious, very strategic, very thoughtful. Um, but I probably wouldn't say that I am as rigid as Quinn is. Probably a little bit. I mean, there's definitely type A personality, but pulling like what those relations are is helpful with playing the character as well. Like, okay, what is familiar to me?
Yeah.
Um, to be able to find that relation to the character a little more, but getting to do something that is completely outside of you is really fun when you have this completely contrasting individual that you get to dive into because Reeve is bold, courageous, like you said. They are fearless essentially. They're like, yeah, I ain't afraid of shit. Like, whatever, dude. I don't give crap. And it just takes on life like oh, I can't even think of the word or the phrase right now, but they're actually I can't think of the phrase and I don't think it's appropriate. But it's they're just willing to go there like no matter what. Like there's no restraints, there's no chains. Um, which is also really interesting because they're a warlock.
Yeah. And there are some literal restraints and chains in place.
So I,
Metaphysical, but
yeah,
literally metaphysical restraints and chains in place, yeah.
but it's gonna be interesting to see how that comes into play because this is Reeve. Reeve is completely like out of control, wanting to go boldly where no man has gone before.
Right, and currently doesn't understand their limits. Is being told
Mhm.
there are no limits, for one,
Right.
uh, and may have, like, a harsh awakening if there are suddenly limits imposed. Um, and
Yeah.
then what would those limits be? Why would this patron have limits? What is
Right.
off limits? Like, yeah,
Which I think will be interesting to explore too, like that relationship that Reeve has with their patron. Um, and kind of this triad of relationship that we have happening too with Quinn, Reeve, the patron. Like, how is this going to impact everyone later down the road?
yeah, yeah, it's I'm excited. As we explore the relationships, I feel like it's also an opportunity to, like, explore the lore a little bit more that we've
Hmm.
built and that we're kind of pulling into this, which isn't necessarily the focus, but it's the part that I enjoy kind of researching.
Yeah.
So For me, it's just fun to get to include those details and to tie them into the story that we're wanting to tell. Um, we're repurposing a lot of like Lovecraftian stuff here
Mhm.
in a way that is like no longer racist or ethnocentric or whatever. We're trying to like retell those stories from a different kind of modern perspective through our own lens, anyways, I should say.
Yeah,
Repurpose those creations.
for
Um,
sure.
so to reinterpret those things is what I'm excited about. And like
Mhm.
the further we go, the closer we get to doing more and more of that. Um, and
Yeah, I
yeah, I don't
think
know. It's going to be fun and scary, but it's really exciting for the fun. I'm excited for the fun and scary stuff.
right. Well, and I think too what's really interesting with Lovecraftian lore is understanding a lot of the fear that Lovecraft used was based on the fear of the times, which I don't know if we're allowed to get super political or not, but it's starting to kind of see a resurgence right now. So it's going to be
Yeah.
interesting to kind of explore that now and be like, okay, how applicable is this in our current realm? Which is one of the things that I think is just interesting about art, writing, lore, mythos is the reason that a lot of that stuff stays around for as long as it does is because there's still purpose for it.
Mhm.
It's still relevant. Um, and it's one of those interesting lessons that sometimes you have a hard time digesting.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's some stuff that shouldn't be digested either, probably, right? Like there's a lot
Mhm.
of Lovecraft stuff that were it not for kind of its cultural significance in hindsight or the impact that it had on like science fiction or
Yeah.
horror in general, should have been ignored outright as it means because of what it means today.
Right.
Um, like so much of his at least early writings especially were just written as like the fear of the other or the fear of the different, and that
Mhm.
was just anyone who wasn't a white male. Um, and if you were to read a story written like that today, and it was kind of so obviously that that is the metaphor, you'd be like, all right, well, fuck this guy. I'm not reading any more of his work.
Right.
I think unfortunately we now find ourselves like living in a country where that kind of work could show up again.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't even be that cleverly disguised either. Like Lovecraft actually did a decent job at cleverly disguising his racism, kind of ethnocentric nationalist beliefs,
Mhm.
um, in the average cultural parlance of, the 1900s, post World War One.
Right.
So well that you could read it and not realize that he's being racist. Honestly, if it's your first time reading Lovecraft, you might not realize that,
Yeah,
except for
absolutely.
the times that he is literally blatantly using, some pretty negative terms. You wouldn't catch
Mhm.
on to the overarching themes. But yeah,
Yeah.
what scares me now is the way our culture seems to be shifting. Not completely, but in some
Mhm.
aspects, some subcultures seem to be shifting.
Yeah.
It's almost like people like this could come up again. And that's why I find it important to like keep looking, keep watching,
Mhm.
repurpose this stuff, take it away from people that would use it for things that they shouldn't be using it for.
No, absolutely. And I think that's like that's part of it, right? Like understanding like this is where it was then and we've learned those lessons or you hope we've learned those lessons, but it does take being aware and being conscious of what is going on. Um because if you don't understand what it's rooted in, then it can be easily disguised if you don't look for those context clues and understand like, oh, this is where this came from. Um it's something that I tell my kid. I was like, the reason that you have to pay attention in history class is if you don't learn the history, it is doomed to repeat itself. Um,
Yeah.
and I think art is one of the really great ways that we can tell those stories and learn those lessons um, in such a elegant and thoughtful way. And I think the other thing that I like that we're doing here is even though tabletop RPGs are traditionally escapism, it's allowing us to confront some of these fears that we may have as well.
Yeah. I think it's you're right. They are so often escapism, but I think they are secretly some of the best therapy that money can buy. Not that people, I mean,
Absolutely.
people do actually turn to them for therapy now, but I think people unintentionally find themselves like therapizing accidentally. Um,
Mhm,
so yeah, I guess I'm actually kind of hoping that we get some benefit out of this practice too. I feel like I already am, honestly,
mm,
just introspectively assessing my own behaviors and actions. And yeah, I don't know. I don't have anything like results from that yet, but I think stories are journeys, and at
mhm.
some point there will be a chapter where I realize this has had an impact on me.
Right. Well, and I think that's the important thing too is just being comfortable with doing the work. Um, that introspection, I think, is just huge as far as human development. Um, I guess if we're if we're going to be sharing this, if people don't know, my background is in psychology and development, so I have a huge interest in cultural psychology, specifically developmental psychology. I do a lot on growth and specialized a bit in group therapy specifically. So, seeing how people confront those conflicts and being willing to do the internal work, I think, is probably the first step to actually handling more challenging situations and preparing yourself for what that conflict is going to look like down the road when it does come up, when you're like, oh, shit, this is a thing for me.
Mm.
Um, and I always used to tell folks, like, get comfortable with being uncomfortable because that's what it is. Like, if it
Yeah,
makes you uncomfortable, that's a good sign you probably need to work on it.
yeah, that's where all the growth happens, right?
Mhm. My kid hates it
Oh,
so much when I say that.
yeah, no, I know. So does mine. It's something I hated to hear too when I was a kid, but
Yep.
it is a lesson that I have learned to love. Something hopefully our characters will learn to love too, because I feel like there's a lot of opportunity to for them to do some of the hard work or learn some lessons the hard way.
Yeah, for sure, and I see it happening. God, I'm just so looking forward to the growth that Quinn and Reeve are going to have and what the internal struggles that they're both going to have, especially with the dynamic that has been set up so far.
Yeah, I know. We set the stage for some pretty big conflicts between one person.
Mhm.
I'm excited to see where it goes.
For sure.
Any last thoughts?
Last thoughts. I think I think a good last thought, and I'm always really curious about this, is how do you come down after a session? Because I know when we close out sessions, it doesn't matter what game I play or I DM, I am hyped as fuck. I'm like, I gotta talk to someone about this.
Yeah, I have a hard time too, to be honest. I need to usually hydrate pretty like thoroughly, even though it's like right before bed. I'm gonna have to drink like a pint of water because
Yep.
I spend, especially as a DM, you spend so much time talking that you can't keep up. Um, Hydrating, usually a snack. Like I usually late night cereal is my thing, so that's
Ooh,
probably the next thing I'm gonna do is get a bowl of cereal.
cereal of
um,
choice though. Like hard
uh,
judgment though. Let's be real. Hard judgment, cereal
so
choice.
I can only eat like the gluten-free protein cereal now, so I eat Catalina Crunch.
I have no idea what that is.
Yeah, you can get it at Costco
Okay.
or on Amazon, but they like rip off of other cereals, so they have like a cinnamon toast crunch version that tastes nothing like regular cinnamon toast crunch.
No,
But
I
that's the one that I
noticed.
go for because cinnamon toast crunch was my favorite cereal growing
I
up.
was like, that's my favorite for sure. I actually went and got a cinnamon toast crunch crispy treat yesterday. So it's a
That's
Rice
sounds
crispy made of cinnamon
awesome.
toast. Yeah, it was amazing. But um, My poor my poor partner. I absolutely have to do, like, a verbal vomit, and I'm like, "I have to tell you everything that just happened."
A full recap.
Yeah. I'm like, "I need to talk to you about this thing because this is what's happening in my head right now, and we did this, and we did this, and this thing was really cool," and bless him, he is so patient. He's like, "That's really I'm glad you had fun. Are you ready for bed?" I'm like, "Nope."
Yeah. 2 hours of game time, then 2 hours recapping with your partner while they're going to bed.
Yeah. He's like, "Do you wanna watch, like, Ted Lasso or something and, like, chill out?" I'm like, "Nope." But yes.
Nope, not done gaming. That's
But
funny.
yeah, no, same thing though. Hydration, I gotta do a verbal recap and vomit, and snacks are usually really helpful. I always It is trickier doing this because we're, like, actually videoing ourselves and recording stuff, so I'm like, "I can't snack while we're playing this time."
Right.
So, but
Maybe
yeah,
we do maybe we start snacking. I think we
I was like, "It's tricky." I'm like, "How" I know that your partner will totally tell you this, but in high school, I was definitely very self-conscious of when I was eating, and I did a lot of this.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I'm that way too. I'll just do it right behind the mic.
It's gonna be like trying to come off screen. I don't have a great way to get off screen though.
Yeah. Or we just take a break. We incorporate, like, a 10-minute snack break next time.
That's true. But thankfully I did like have quite a bit of food before our session today. So I was like, okay, we're good. I fully fueled. We are good to go.
I did too. I ate dinner, like, right at 5 o'clock, but I'm starving again now. Yeah, it gets you just get so amped that, like,
Yeah.
I burned all my energy already.
Yeah. And it's weird too, because it's like, it's not physical energy, it's mental energy. But yeah, you definitely like go through
Right.
it.
Hmm. Your brain takes so many calories, though.
Mhm. And so I think that is probably my closing thought for folks. Have a way to come down after you game.
Yeah, definitely. Something healthy, preferably, but something to bring you back down.
I mean, depends on your lifestyle. I'd like to think that I'm usually healthy, but damn, I love popcorn.
Popcorn's healthy. Snacks are good. Food is good.
I like birthday cake flavored popcorn.
That's fucking disgusting. I'm sorry.
It's
You're
so
wrong.
good.
No, you're wrong. Podcast over. We're done. I
You're
quit.
like, I picked the wrong person. I can't believe I did this. It's the sweet and salty. It's like kettle corn, but it's got the birthday cake
But
flavor
they
on
already
it.
made that. They made kettle corn.
This is so much better though. I will go hard for birthday cake any single time. It is hands down the best flavor in the
I
world.
will try it once.
All right, then. We'll see you next time.
Alrighty. I'll see ya.